Alright, so welcome back again. My name is Jesse, and in this wonderful and exciting tutorial, we're trying to explore database ORM and then serialization in Django and then in FastAPI, right? So Django is a very nice framework that comes with a lot of things included. So in Django, it comes with its own ORM, which you can connect to different forms of databases. And with the ORM, you can interact with your database, and you also have some form of validation. There's also the option of Django REST framework that allows you to have some form of serialization in which you can serialize and deserialize data, either using Django REST framework or SQLPy or any of them. That is Django. Now let's see what FastAPI has to offer us. So unlike Django, FastAPI doesn't have its own inbuilt ORM. You have to use something different, right? So there is Pydantic model, which serves as a form of validation and which you can also use as serializer. And there is also Sqlalchemy, right, which is the all-one-in-one most popular database management software or library in Python that allows you to be able to interact with the database. Okay, so with FastAPI, either in case you want to interact with the database, you will need Pydantic model for your data serialization and validation, and you also need Sqlalchemy, right, or you can also use a different ORM. But there is a very nice library from FastAPI, the same person that made FastAPI, called SQLModel, that combines both Pydantic model and then Sqlalchemy model together as one, so that you don't need to write double code, right? You just write one SQLModel, which will handle your Pydantic validation and serialization, as well as your database interactions, right? Which is very cool. So let's see how to work with SQLModel and then with FastAPI. So I'll go back again to my workspace, which is here. This is what we are building. So if I go back and I check it out, which is 1207. So this is the app that we are working on. And if I go back to my docs, you can see that this is the app, right? So this is what we built by the end of it. With FastAPI, we have this Swagger endpoint in which you can read all the books that have been written, which has been serialized well, and then you can post something, right? So I can post and create a book. So let's call it as 0 to 1, 0 to 1, right? And the author is Peter Thiel. And then we can just give it some number, so 017, something like that. And then the description is about startups, right? Startups, and let's say tech. And then I can just give it some number, so let's say 4, right? Later on, you see how to fix these things. If I click on it, it has been passed, and now I can go back again. And if I check it from here, we have the 0 to 1 added, and I can also search for it. So if I come back here, I can just read number 4, and then we have the 0 to 1. I can also delete it. I can patch it, partial update or full update, and then I can also get the book by title. So this is just a basic CRUD, right? Create, read, update using FastAPI model. So let's see how to build it from scratch. So I'll go back again to here, which is the old one. I'll stop this one here, so it will be available in our repository later on. But let's go back here and then let's build it from scratch from here. So let's make a directory, and I'm going to create as my CRUD app. So I'll move into my CRUD app here, and then we start writing some code. So in case you don't have any of them, you can install the package. So pip install FastAPI, and then you also need to install UVCon, and then you also need to install SQLModel, right? So these are the things that you need to install on your system. Perfect. So after that, I'll just go back again and let's create our file. So touch app.py, then let's open it with VS Code. You can use a virtual environment, but I don't want to use a virtual environment now. Perfect. So let's start from it. So let's start writing our code. So from FastAPI, I want to import FastAPI, and I also want to these are the most important one for now. Then I will create our basic app. So app is going to be FastAPI, and then we need to close the app, right? So we have our app initialized, and then we need to create our first route, which is app.get, and I can just give it my basic app directory. So def, this can be async or sync. Then I can just call it as my, let's say, home, right? Home page. Perfect. Then we can now return something. So title, so backend developers, right? Something like that. Course. Perfect. That is it, right? So this is how to start with it. So we have initializing our FastAPI, we are creating a route. In some cases, you can also close it with this, the if main. So if underscore underscore name underscore underscore is equal to main, in case you want to run it as a script. Then you can just use uvicon.run, then you pass in the app, then you pass in the host that you want to listen on. So in our case, we want to listen on port 127.0.0.1, and then you can also specify the port, which in a case is going to be, say, port 8000, right? This is one way, and because of that, I have to import uvicon, right? This is one of the ways you can run it. And now to run this one, I can just go back again to my terminal, which is here, right? So that's activated this my shell here. So sometimes it may not work. So let's try it out. So to run it, I can just go back to the location I have and run it like Python app.py. So it's telling that I don't have it, so I have to install FastAPI uvicon SQLModel. So it's going to install them perfectly for us so that I can run it because I activated a virtual environment. So it's installing everything that I need. Perfect. And now I can just run it again. And our app is running, right? So if I open this, so I can copy this one and then I can open it here. So we have our app here, right? Our first page, the home page, and I can execute backend developers, right? So everything is working as expected. Now let's see how to work with the other aspect of our application. Right? How do we interact or add databases and validation for it? So that is where Pydantic comes inside. That is where we have those things that we mentioned here. Right? And so we have the Pydantic model and an SQL model. So let's start with it. So I'm just going to go back again. You can do it like this. Create your SQL and create a Pydantic model and stuff, but with SQL model it's handled for you, right? So I'll just go back again, and then from Pydantic we want to import our base model and then my field, right? That's what we're using for all our data. And then from typing I want to also import optional. Perfect. That is, so let's create all our models. So this is going to be our models. So these models are going to be for our Pydantic model plus SQL model, right? And these will be used for the serialization, validation, and then also database. So let's start. I'm going to create something called my book model. And this book model is going to inherit from SQL model, so I have to import it. So from SQL model, import my field, right? And then we also need to import SQL model, right? And then we need to import sessions to handle our session, and create engine to connect with our database, and then select to make some select queries. So I'll pass it here, SQL model. Perfect. And then let's give the title, which is a string. So the type is a string, and I'm going to equate it to a field, right? And a field is going to, I can specify this one to be the index. that we can search or can be the ID. I'm also going to give it an author string, and I can also give it, let's say, a number, so ISBN number, which is going to be a string, and I can specify the field, which, let's give it a minimum length of 4 and then a maximum length of 5, right? Something like that. And then I can also specify the default factory, which is going to be the default value that I want to use. So let's give it as a string, so 001 1, something like that. Perfect. Now let's also add some description to it, which is going to be a string, which is optional, right? So let's make it optional. So optional string, so that if the person does not specify it, it will still work. You can also make all of these optionals, right? Perfect. So this that we have done here, right? This thing we have done is just combining Pydantic model together with the SQL. Otherwise, we would have to have done something like this. So class book, then I have to go with my base model, and then so if it was not like SQLModel, would have done something like this. The same thing, would have had our title, which is going to be our string, right? And then we also have another one for the author, which is also going to be a string type, and then you specify the ISBN number, which is going to be string, and then the description, which is going to be a string, something like this. And then this is going to be for the validation, right? Our serializer. So this will be for validation and then validation. And we will create one for the database, right? So this is going to be for the database, which would have been, let's say, class, so book model, something like that. And then this will have gone with my Sqlalchemy, right? So in case I was using SQL, I would have gone with this option here. Instead of going straight away with this, I would have gone here, and then let's create a base, which will be declarative base, and then I'm going to inherit from this declarative base. So let's make it capital B, right? It's supposed to be this without here, and I'll specify the table, which would have been, let's say, books. And then I'll now move on and create my ID, which is going to be, let's say, Sqlalchemy dot column. Then I'll pass in my Sqlalchemy dot, let's say, integer. Then primary key go to true, and then I would have specified the index, so index is go to true, something like this. And I would have repeated it, something similar like this for the rest, right? I would have repeated this I would have repeated it for the title, for the author, and this would have changed to, instead of it being a string, it's going to, instead of it being an integer, it's going to be a string, and I'll specify whether the index is true or not. And I would have done the same thing for this, and then for the description, right? So how I'll define this, and then define this, and then under the base model, I would have created a class called config, and I'm going to specify that, okay, this is a class of config. I want you to treat it as an ORM, so ORM model, or ORM mode is equal to true, right? I would have to do this and do this, so I'm doing two things just to get a validation and my interaction with my database, right? With SQL Sqlalchemy, and then Pydantic model. But with SQL model, all of this then what I've done, these two stuff are replaced by this self, right? So I don't need to define this and define this, which is quite a lot, right? Just to do one thing. So that is what this SQL model is trying to simplify. Perfect. So that is why we are using this. Okay, now since we have done that, let's move on from here. So we have created one. This is going to be our base model. We can also do the rest. We can now come back again and then let's create our post. So app dot post, and this is going to be our books, right? And then we can also specify, so let's say create book, which will take in the model that we have defined above, right? So which is this particular SQL model, book model, which I've defined. So we can now come back here and specify, okay, this is going to take in book, which is having a type of the book model that we have defined, right? So in our case, it's going to be my book model, right? You can call it a book if you want. So let's call it book to save us time. So book, and then let's call it as book, right? So it's going to take that one. So it's taking both it as a Pydantic model for serialization and validation, as well as for the ORM, right? Perfect. And we can now move on and create a session. So let's go with session. As then we have to pass in some parameters as session, and then we can now go and create that particular book. So db item, the book item, and then we just go with my book that we are passing, and then we can now go with session. Let's add my db item or my book item, and I can just go with session. Let's commit to save it, and then session dot refresh db item to get it back again, so that we can now return the db item, right, from the database. So this is how to do that, which is simplified. Now we also need to specify where the database is going to be, our engine, and that is where we go back to the top of our file. So we have my create engine, we have SQL. So we're just going to go back again and specify where we want the database to be and the tables to be created, right? So I'll just go back again, and then I will go back here on top of this. Let's create my query. So SQLite URL is going to be my option here. So let's make it simple. So it's going to be here, right? So we are using SQLite. You can also use any of the database, and I'm going to specify the name of the database. So let's go to say db or books.db, right? And then I can also specify the engine. So engine, or let's specify connect argument, can spell, which is going to be specifying the number of threads I want to go. So check same thread, so that we have multiple threads to help us with that. Then engine is going to be create engine. Then I'll pass in my SQL URL, and I'll pass in my echo tree means that show me what is happening behind the scene, to show me all the ORM, whatever the ORM is doing. I want to see the actual code, the actual SQL syntax code. Then connect argument is going to be connect argument, right? That is it. So this is our engine. So it's going to connect to our database, and then I have to pass this one inside my session. That is all that we need, right? Perfect. So we need to create our table in which we are going to put our data there on start of the app. So I'll just go back again to here, app, and you can see that on start of the app, so on event, which will be it's deprecated, but let's use it like that. So on event, I want you to do some stuff, right? So on, if there is a startup event, just on startup, I want you to create my DB and then my table. So I have to create this particular function, create DB and table function, and what does it do? It's just going to create my table. So SQLModel dot metadata dot create all, then engine. So this is going to pick my model, and then it's going to create my table inside this particular database, right? That is what it's going to do. Perfect. So that is all. So let's save this one here, and I want to stop this one, and then we want to run it with the reload. So let's save it, let's close it from here, and then we can run it with this option here. So uvcon, right, and the name of the app is called CRUD app. So dot main, and that is the name of the app. So app and then app, right? So this app refers to the name of the file, and this app refers to this app here. And then we can now specify that, okay, reload. So if everything works, it's going to create a database, and then it's going to start it. So you have to make sure that here SQL model is very important to specify that, okay, that is going to be an SQL model, and you also have to specify that, okay, we also want to create a table, right? So let's make a base one. So this is the default one. We can make it like this. Table is equal to true, right? To automatically create a table, but we can also create a base one. So this can be the book base, and then I'll just create one for the class book, right? And then this is going to be the same thing. So book base, we are inheriting from that, and then here I can specify that, okay, table is equal to true, and then I can just go with my pass, right? Or can just specify the ID, optional, which is going to be integer, and then I'll just create a field default is equal to true, and let's create the primary key is equal to true, so that we automatically create that one anytime you create it, and we can also move on. So this is going to create this particular table for us with our ID already initialized. Let's save it, and then let's run it again. And now you can see that it has created a database here, right? And then if I go back here, you can see that because we specified echo here, the query that was used to, that was generated by the ORM is shown here, right? Because of the echo. Very cool. So title, author, ISBN, description, ID, primary key, which is the same thing that we had here. So title, author, ISBN, description, and then ID have been specified here. Perfect. Right. Cool. Now let's see if it's working. So I'll go back again to my application here. Let's refresh it. And now we have the create book, and you have it here. So I can now create it. I can create something simple. So let's create the first book. Let's call it as Bible. Everybody like the Bible. And then who created the Bible? Men, right? Or let's call it as here humans. And then let's give Bible favorite number 777. Then book about man's relationship with their creator, right? Something like that. And then this, we can also specify the ID. So we see that we made the primary key integer, right? Not now, but we can also specify that this is supposed to be none, right? Because here we did not specify, we specify it to be true, but we can make it none rather instead of true. So it is going to start and make some changes. So now this is now none, right? So let's make it as 1. So let's execute. If if everything works, it's going to give us a result, but it's not working. It's giving us an error. So unprocessed entity because of some error. So let's reset and then let's refresh. Now this is better because this is 0. Try it. So let's start again with the Bible, and then we can just give it humans. Bible was written by humans anyway. 777 and then so book about humans and their relationship with their creator, right? And then I can just give it as an ID of 1. So if I click on execute, if everything works perfect, so it's giving us an error. So I think the reason it's giving us an error, we can check from here on process entity, and then we have to check why it's giving us this error. So value strength minimum, right? So this is 4, but we are specifying 3. So that means that, as we said, the validation coming from Pydantic is working. So that explains why we are getting the error here, right? So it's giving us that, okay, the value is supposed to be more than 4, right? It's supposed to be 4 or more because we specified. So the Pydantic model is working behind the scene doing the validation and serialization before it's even entered the database. So I have to go back again and change this one from 777 to 777 again, execute, and now everything is working perfectly, right? So you have seen how we can just use SQLModel to combine both validation and serialization together with the ORM database instructions to make our app simple, right? So we don't need to do the two of them, right? And you can see the code that was executed. So select all, blah blah blah, right? Pivot. Okay. So everything is working as expected. So now you have seen how to create it. Let's see how to also read. So I can just go back with def. So read books. I want to get all the books, and this is going to take in the book because I want to read every part of the book or to read all the books from our model. We can just go without specifying any parameter here. Then let's create our route. So this will be a app.get, and I'll specify that, okay, I want to get all the books from our ORM. And with the response model is similar to, in case you are coming from Django, the response model here is similar to, so output serializer, right? How do we want it to look like, right? So in case you're coming from Django, we would have created a serializer to get the input, right, and want to P the output, right? But with Pydantic and then SQLModel, all of them is handled for you. So I just pass in the particular stuff I want. So let's pass in as my list, and this list is going to be the list of the book, right? So I can just pass in this. So this book is coming from here, this one. So it's only going to give the IDs, right, together with all of these things, right? You can also make it book read if you want, anyhow you want it to be, and it's still going to work, right? So that like it's just bring some stuff there. But if I leave it like this, book, and then I'll pass in, I'll go back again, and then I'll have to fetch that particular data, right? So in case we want to fetch it, we would have done select, say, all from the table that we had, right? So how do we do that? We just use a wait session, connect to the database as session, and then I want you to fetch all the books. So let's go this. We want to fetch every book from it. So books is going to be my session dot execute. Then I'll pass in my select. Now pass in the model, which is book, right? So select all. Perfect. So we are selecting everything from here. So the select all must come outside the execution from here. Perfect. So now it's going to return everything, and I can now return my books. It's going to return it as a list, right? Because we specified it here. So I have to go back to my type in and then import list, save it. So everything is working well. So I go back and I refresh. You see that we have my read books here. If I click on execute, now so we have the book there in a format of a list, right? So everything is there as expected. Very cool, right? Perfect. Now we can also work back again and we can add another one. So let's add another stuff here. So I'll go back again to the post, try it out. Let's add another book, which is going to be, say, Django DX, right? And then I'll just specify, so Adam, so what's the name? Adam Johnson. Yeah, and then can just give it some number, and then this is Django, yeah, developer experience, right? Then I will just give it 2 or 1 or 2. Execute. Now everything is working perfectly. Let's add another one to 10x rule, and then this is going to be another book I'm adding. So let's add another book called from Grant Cardone. These are good books you can read. And then yeah, you can just put some stuff there. So 10s rule, and let's make this one as 3. Save, right? Perfect. So if I go back to my books here, if I execute, now we're going to have all of them, the 3 of them here, as you can see. So we have all the 3 there. Perfect. So everything is working as expected. So you have seen how to create, read. Now let's move on to update and delete. So let's add another one for the read in case I want to just read one of the books. So def read, and then I can just specify, say, read a book, and this time I want to pick one book, right? Not the entire book. I want to pick one book. So book ID, and then this is going to be an int. And how do we read it? This is similar to, so select all from table where, so ID, so book dot ID is equal to something, right? Let's say a particular ID. That is what you're trying to do here. So I can just use the same thing that we had here. This time you're not returning a list. We can just return a book, right? Because we are just fetching one book. And then I have to also specify the ID that I want to get from here. So this is going to be my book ID, which is what I'm passing inside this particular function. And then I can now go with session. So with session is okay, but there is another way we can make it simple so that we don't need to repeat this thing here. So the other way that we have to repeat with session, we now get the book. So let's go to this book item, a single book. Then I'll just go with my session.get. Now pass in my book model and then the book ID, right? And then if not book item, right, then I can raise HTTP exception. How do you spell exception? Exception. Right, and I can just give it a status code of 404, so in case it doesn't find it, and then detail. So book not found, right? So I have to import this one from FastAPI. Yeah. So if it doesn't find it, it's perfect, but if it finds it, then it returns it. So return the book item. So let's save it, and if I refresh, we have the ID. I can now pass in an ID of 1. If it finds it, it's going to return it here, right? return the entire stuff. If I pass in an ID of, let's say 7, it's not there, so it's not found, right? So everything is working perfectly well. So this is repetition. You're repeating this over and over. But how do we simplify it? So we can simply simplify this one by using the dependency injection. So we can now make it like this. So let me comment this out. This we are using, so dependency injection, and then with this dependency injection we will simplify this thing. So instead of using the context manager, we no more be using this. We will just go back again to Django, or not to Django, but to FastAPI, then import depends. Then we need to create a function to fetch these things there. So let's call the function so get session, and then I'm going to use the same thing that we are using here, this repetition that we are doing, right? I'll copy this repetition stuff here, right? And then now I'll just use yield session. So anytime, instead of me rewriting it, this will be called automatically, right? And then it will just yield the session, and I'll use the session to do whatever I want to do. So now I'll come back here, then inside my main function, I'll pass in, I'll tell FastAPI that, okay, I want to use dependency injection, right, instead of using the context manager. So I'll specify, okay, pick my session, which is going to be the session model, and this session model will depend on my get session, so that now I don't need to call this anymore. So this is no more needed. Ni nada. Ich brauche nicht. And then I'll just go back. So everything stays. And now I've taken it out. So automatically going to pick this session and then fetch the book, right? So if I save it and I refresh, if I do back again, let's use number 3, execute, it's working, right, as you can see. So that is how to use dependency injection. So you have seen how to still do create read. Now let's do the update. So app, so it's going to be my app.patch. It's mostly either put or patch. So patch is partial update, and then put is full update, right? So let's do a partial update because that is mostly useful. Then I'm going to specify that the books, and then the book ID. So the person will specify the ID, and I can also specify the response model that I want. Let's go with the book, right? Same thing. So def, so we can call it, just say update book. Then this is going to take the book ID, which is an integer. Then also going to do the same thing. We had the same session stuff. Perfect. And then we can now fetch the book. So first we will fetch the book itself. So book item going to be my session dot get. I'll pass in the book and then the book ID. So we're going to fetch the book. Perfect. So if we, after fetching the book, so if not book item, if you can't find the book, then I'll just raise the error. So the book is not found. But if I find the book, right, then I'm going to get the entire book data. So it's going to be my book.date. So book.date is going to be using Pydantic behind the scene, picking the book that we have, right, which we have retrieved, right, and then we are going to convert it, right. So that is a basic understanding. So we have the book ID, and we also need to specify, apart from this, we also need to specify the book that we are getting, right, because we need to get the entire data set. So let's call it as book, which is going to be my book, right. So we're going to fetch the entire book. That's what they're passing here. And then we need to specify, so exclude on set, so I can work on updates, true, so that, right, partial update. Then say that for key, because this is a dictionary, for key and then value in my book data dot item, because it's a dictionary, I want to set attribute. So set attribute is that it's going to first check for that particular object and get the key, so the attribute, so something like, say, book, the ID, so this ID is now the key, and then the value is whatever value you be passing there, right? So value, so it's going to set the attribute of that object, right? That's the meaning. Then after that's done, that we want to add it to session.add the book item. And then we're going to do the same thing, right? We will now continue. So session.commit and then session.refresh, so that we get the book back from the database. So book ID from the database, and then now we return the book item, right? So perfect. So let's see if it works. So hopefully it works. Perfect. So we have the create, read, update. Now let's pick one. So I'll pick one, like let's say 1. So if I go back to here and I pick 1, we had this one here, right? So this is what we had. So ID, title, book, blah blah blah. I can copy this and then I can modify it here. So we had it here. I can modify this. So let's modify the 77 to 76 or 78, and then I'll just execute. And now it has perfect. It's perfect now. It has, you can see the change has come. If I go back and I check it out again here, it is no more 777, it is now 778, right? So that means that the partial update works, right? Perfect. So you have seen how to work with update. Now let's go with the last one, which is delete. So app dot delete. Delete is mostly not used, but it's very important, which is books, and then I'll specify the ID of the book I want to delete. So book ID. You can also specify the response model if you want, right? So you can specify the response model. I can just leave it without specifying the response model, but yeah, we can do that. But let's not specify response mode. We are deleting something, so just tell the person that it has been deleted. So def, and I can specify that, okay, delete book, right? And then I'm going to pass in the book ID, which is an integer, and I'll do the same thing with the dependency injection here. So pass it here. Perfect, right? And then I can delete it. So to delete it, so we can now simply delete it with this. So book, you need to get a book. So session.get, now pass in the particular book I want to delete, and then the book ID. Perfect, right? And if not book item, I want to repeat it and tell the person the book was not found, so you cannot delete it. Otherwise, if it's found, then we now delete it. So session.delete. Now delete the book item that it has found. And then I'll commit it to save it. And then, so this commit to save is going to save it to the database, and then I can now return to the user, okay, right, true. So that means that the book was successfully deleted. So let's go back again and refresh. Now we have our create, read, update, delete. So let's delete number 4 or number 3. Perfect. So 3 is gone. If I go back and I search for 3 is no more there. So the book not found. Perfect. So that is how to build a very simple CRUD app using FastAPI and then Sqlalchemy and then SQLModel, right? So we have seen that with SQLModel we are combining Pydantic and then SQL models together, so that both validation, serialization, and interaction with our database ORM is done by one staff to make our code more simple. Otherwise, we have to write a lot of boilerplate code to just do the same thing, right? Like you have to do one for the serialization and validation, and then one for the database interaction, right? Which is quite cumbersome. But with this option here, we are doing two things with one, right? Which is very cool. So that is how to build a simple CRUD. So to recap, we just imported our packages. We created our SQL model, which is a combination of our Pydantic model for serialization and validation, as well as our database interaction, ORM, in one. And then we created our engine in our connection to our database. We created our database, our table. We created a dependency injection here. Simplify code, right? And then to make it right, and then we initialize our app. Then on start we create a database, and then we created our create. We had one for our read, and then we are using dependency injection here for this, and then update, and then we have the final one, delete. So thank you for watching the tutorial. In case you have any question or contribution, you can put inside the comment section below, and see you another time. Stay blessed. Bye. Let me know your opinion about this video. I hope it was a blessing. See you.